Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and massive, massive welcome to Spiritual Times with me, Philip Solomon, every Thursday when I try and answer some of the things you've asked me to talk about or to give you some guidance on things. And I do my very best and say that I know everything, but I try to expand what I have into knowledge for you. Spent many years working as a qualified teacher. I did my postgraduate teaching certificate and very much enjoyed working in universities and colleges of higher education. I have a bit of a cold tonight and must apologise for that, and I'm sure you'll bear with me. Well, something I always seem to be asked about a lot, really, is something that I think is quite simple, really, and yet it can be deeply complex, and that is karma. The very word karma, what does it mean? Well, it's a simple concept to understand, really. It is the sum of a person's actions in this and previous states of existence, past lives, if you like, or the life that you things that have passed that you've happened in this life, and viewing it as deciding their fate in future existences, in lives to come, or in the life that they're living now. It is often summarised very well, I think, by the phrase, what goes around comes around. And what that means is very simple terms. If you're good and you're kind to people, they'll be the same to you. But if you treat them badly, they won't want to have anything to do with you or maybe treat you the same. I think two big things to think about is, friendship and forgiveness. Forgiveness always has to be there. If someone upsets you or you've done the wrong thing, if you can apologise and be forgiven, that's a massive part of karma for yourself, really. Key aspects of karma would include, I suppose, obviously cause and effect. Karma is a universal principle of cause and effect, of course. Not a system of punishment or reward administered by God or any deity, in my opinion, but every action, whether physical, verbal, or mental, creates a corresponding sort of effect for you and those that are around you, those that you care about. How can I put this in simple terms? Intention matters. Let's look at that. The moral quality of an action is primarily determined by the intention behind it, isn't it? Actions motivated by positive intentions like kindness and compassion create positive karmic imprints for you and others, while those that are driven by negative intentions, like having hatred for someone or being greedy about everything in life or not being prepared to forgive someone when, they've obviously done their very best to put matters right. You've got to watch that because, it can cause you bad karma. There you go in simple terms. Right. Accumulation. The effects of actions accumulate over time and across lifetimes. Good actions lead to positive outcomes, happiness, and favourable circumstances. But bad actions almost always lead to negative outcomes, perhaps suffering even, and challenging situations that you don't really like in your life. That's how I would explain it. Liberation. In many Eastern philosophies, like, I suppose, the one we would always think of closely associated with karma, Buddhism, for instance, but you could think of Jainism. And there's even a link with Christianity, really. The ultimate goal is to achieve liberation, or that word we love to speak about, nirvana, perfection in all things, from the cycle of karma, coming into this world as birth and leaving it behind you, because those are two things that we always will eventually see through and have to face. Liberation in many Eastern philosophies, like Hinduism, proves this from a circle that they understand. And they clearly know that, coming back to what I've said, if you don't live a good life, then, you probably in the next life be forced to have a life that you're forced to be different in. It's just looking at it like that, really, and understanding it, really. Liberation, as I said, it's a philosophy, Hinduism, Buddhism, um, basic karma, that is, if you like. In essence, karma is about moral responsibility and care. Moral responsibility and care. Think about that. Important that. Your current experiences, some people who understand karma would say, are a result of past life experiences that you've had. And, happen again in this life when you repeat them over and over again. You make the same mistakes. And that's not really learning, really. What you want to do is look at your karma. And if you have things that you simply repeat and you don't like in your life, try and change them around and live life in a better way now. It's in essence, karma is about moral responsibility. Your current experiences, as I've said, are possibly a result of past life experiences or what you've repeated doing over and over again in this life and not learning from it. And that's something of a problem, really, that is. Origin and authority. In personal, natural, self-operating law of moral cause and effect, tied to the soul and often spanning multiple lifetimes that you've experienced, divine commands issued by God to Moses. Those were the starting point of the ancient biblical texts, weren't they? And I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a minute, really. How can I put this? Those divine commandments that were issued to God, to Moses, as I say, requiring faith and obedience to what the Israelites, thought of as their personal creator, God, whatever you want to term it. I always say there can only be one God, whether you're a Catholic, a Protestant, a Jew, a Jain, a Buddhist. There can only really be one God, can't there? But I'm sure we often live many lives where we're introduced to different considerations and understanding and following of various deities and the word God. It's an interesting one, isn't it, really? Let me look at this. Few notes that I've taken out here and that might interest you. Focus. Focus on all actions, intentions and thoughts, because they'll have consequences. Primarily aimed at achieving spiritual liberation. That's what you want to be aimed at. Or nirvana, as I call it. Forgiveness and redemption, two of the same things. Consequences must generally be experienced or learned from, or perhaps through ethical training and spiritual practices, maybe taking training courses with people who are, very spiritual, we hope in their life, and want to take on a teaching path of helping you. Forgiveness is a big key, really, because if you can't forgive others, then that will burn up in you, really, just as much as what you may even want them to suffer. But it's not the right pathway. It's certainly not the way to go forward for karma, not in any stretch or imagination. Right, let's go on a bit more. Scope of consequences. Consequences can manifest in this life or future lives, reincarnation. Consequences are generally understood within the context of current life and afterlife. So I'm going to just give you an example about, I am a Christian, a spiritualist Christian, but there's a lot of, I suppose that the roots of all Christian religions are in the Bible. I don't agree with everything that's in the Bible. Some things I find a little bit hard to understand, but you can come across and say the different things that are rare, really, and very, very good for learning you about things. That's what I believe, anyway. Right, some personal experiences of myself. Well, I'm a great believer that if you give and you're kind and you have love for people, that's what will come back to you. It's back to that old saying, what goes around comes around. And I often think one of the best principles that you can look at for karma is look at it alongside what Moses was given on the tablets for the Ten Commandments. Because I think there was good today for living a good life and having karmic balance than they would have been all those way back in history times. You read the Ten Commandments, well, some of the more obvious ones, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt honour people, thou shalt not steal, covet your neighbour's wife. Now you're going to go through all the Ten Commandments because, you're going to know them. But they run alongside what would be good karma, or good lessons to be taught there. So not everything. I mean, it certainly tells you in the Bible that, God won't necessarily punish you uh, for the bad things or the mistakes that you make. That you might even find that comes back in generations, and your kids and their kids get punished for the things that you do. I have a job to get my head around that one. I can't see how that would be correct, but maybe it is. Maybe we have to think about that and make sure that we teach our kids not to make the mistakes that we do and to be loving and kind. And coming back to forgiveness is a big thing. If your kids disappoint you, they didn't get to university, they didn't marry the person that you would want them to. You've got to try and make a positiveness from that and sort of think, well, maybe sometime this happened in the past, this happened to me. Maybe I had a situation where I had a very difficult period where my parents were very strict and made demands on me that I had to accept. Even today, in a changing world, there are some ladies who still, well, have to accept arranged marriages, don't they? And I'm not one really for knocking arranged marriages because they do seem to, whatever you say, they do seem to be successful. But I am a little bit finding that difficult, really, because I think it's taken away the right for that person to choose who they want to be with. And I would say if we're looking at it in terms of karma, if they're not with who they should be in this life, they probably have to be within the next life. I think karma's about being kind to people as well. To give you a couple of examples, I try to be kind to everybody, but I can think of a couple of instances where I've been particularly making efforts to help someone. I remember a few years ago, the member of my family, I'm not going to say who because that's wouldn't be a correct thing to do, but they had a bill to pay of well over £200, and basically he didn't have the money to pay it, and he wasn't the sort of person who would accept you giving it him or charity. So I sat down and I asked Spirit to help me. And we were quite a young couple, me and Kath there at that time, and we'd got a little one, to look after and to take care of, and his sister who was still young. But I'd saved a little bit of money for something that I was going to buy, an instrument. I won't go into details. But something coming to mind, the only way this is going to work, we'll type a letter up and we'll put £250 in that letter and tell this person that they've won a lottery, a special lottery prize. And they tried to deliver it earlier on, but they couldn't get no answer from the door, and it had to be delivered by cash. And you're probably thinking, you must be daft. Maybe I am, but I helped. It had to be done. And within about 2 weeks, in a certain situation, that money came back to me. I was selling something and I got more for it, really, quite a bit more than what it was worth. And I think that could sort of be a bit of cause and effect taking place. If I know somebody is in trouble, where they really, really need money, you can't do it with everybody, because you'd have no money to spend, would you? But I've known situations where I've been worried about people and I've put £20 through their door or £100 if they need it, and thought nothing of it, and I leave it at that. But I do think that sort of situation, the good things that you do come back to you, and I think that's what karma is all about. And I hope you can consider that and take that forward in your life. It's an impossible thing to really explain all about, I suppose, in such a short example. But basically, that's what it is. You know, if you want to go along and study Buddhism or something like that, you know, which I suppose the original people of those things brought it to the Western world in the last well, going on for 100 years more so, I suppose. But many people follow that way of life today, don't they? And I think they're a better life for it. Another thing that I thought that I would talk to you about, that you asked me about really, is having bad thoughts about people. And you know, we've all, I don't think anybody's not done it where you've said, well, I wish so and so would break their leg. I know it's a terrible thing, isn't it? But oh, I wish that woman or that man had fall over and break their glasses or something in temper. But you know, spoken words are very, very powerful things. I've had lots of people who come along to me and say, you know, Phil, we've had unusual experience. Can you explain it, Philip? And I said, well, what do you want me to explain? And they've said, well, you know, we got together and we wished a certain person that something would happen to us. She's a very, very cruel person to us and the young people. And none of us liked her. And they would have probably followed some sort of little spell or something, you know, the sort of thing. But really, it's just words, isn't it, really? Just speaking words. And I suppose that's what a spell does, really. But cut a long story short, that person had a very bad accident, they very nearly passed to the oil life. And these people were very upset about what they'd done, these spoken words. That's probably the extreme. But I do think thoughts are things that you have to be very careful about, because I think if you keep thinking about people and having bad thoughts about them because you think that they're not the way they should be with you, you know, you're sending negative energy that's not good, really. The best thing to do is to just, I know it's really hard and you're going to question this, but those who treat you the worst, if you can wish them and send them love, yeah, love and light. I often say love and light when I finish something that I've written. You're much more likely to feel better in yourself, and maybe they will even pick up on those words, on that energy, because words have energy, and change the way they are to you. I suppose, to be quite honest, that probably does intrinsically link with what the workshop or whatever, the lecture it is, whatever you want to call it tonight, has to do with, well, you know, karma. Your karma, and what is it, and how does it work? I wouldn't want to go into great details about it because I have studied karma in spiritual terms, and as I say, the example that I found that worked very well for me, from my background, was similarities to what you could see from the Ten Commandments, you know, and I found that quite interesting. Well, it's not a very long one tonight, but I hope it's answered your question. What is karma? A lot of you have sent questions to me, or places I've been doing talks have asked me to explain it. What do people mean when they talk about karma? And as I said right at the show, well, I don't think show. I still think I'm on radio or TV, don't I? The show. You know, remember what goes around comes around. Or what does that mean in simple terms? The good things that you do will be recognised. And the bad things, you know, if you do bad things, you'll find to people you find eventually that will probably come round to you. Don't be like that. Keep sending them love and light, however much they upset you, and you'll find yourself on a better pathway. Your karma will be good. Your karma will work, and it will give you a better life and make you more happy. As usual, good night, God bless. Be good in your life if you can. If you can't, be good, do your very best and be careful. And I'll speak to you in 7 days' time about another subject that I hope you might be interested in. Good night and God bless one and all.